all staying safe from coronavirus. And just when you're not supposed to go out anymore, if you do go out, you might get hurt by a brick or your business might get burned down. So we're in a really tumultuous time, and prophetically, this lines up with what myself and some people have been saying about things are just not going to be normal, and they're just going to getting worse and worse as these birth pangs happen, as we're pulsating towards Jesus coming back, and of course the rise of the Antichrist. So I wanted to talk today about what's going on with this roaring of the people. Not that this is the roaring of the people that will birth the Antichrist or make way for the Antichrist, but this is a symbol of it. So this is kind of a symbol of it. I'm not saying it is, and I totally respect peaceful protesters, and I think they should peacefully protest. But we have a lot of extreme groups involved, terrorist groups, domestic terrorism, and we have a lot of looters, and we have just a lot of unsettled people, maybe because they don't have jobs and they're happy to get out of their house after coronavirus. So I'm not saying this is the roaring of the people, but it was the perfect time to talk about the roaring of the people. So the roaring of the sea of people. So in the Bible, the sea, the beast rises out of the sea at the end times. The beast rises out of the sea. And I actually had a open vision of a beast with 10 horns and 7 heads rising out of the sea of people in New York City when the president of Iran was speaking in 2005, just giving me a little precursor of what the little horn might look like, what the Antichrist might look like. And of course, he'll be magnified, so he magnifies himself among the people above God. So right now, though, is a great time to talk about the sea of people and what might be happening before the Antichrist 14. So the beast rises out of the roaring and raging sea of nations and peoples in anxiety and fainting, in fear at what is coming on the earth. So when people, each of the beasts, the fourth beast that will rise is supposed to be the most terrifying, and of course he only has 3.5 years, but each of the 4 beasts that have risen up have been brought in by the sea of people being unsettled and wanting something else and wanting a change. And so we're going to talk about the Hebrew translation of Isaiah 17:12 through 13. A literal translation of it we have here. Woe, the roar of many peoples, like the noise of the roaring seas, and the rushing of nations as a rush, like mighty rushing waters. The nations like the rushing of many rushing waters. But rebuke it, and it flees far away, and is caused as the chaff, as the mountains before the wind, and as a whirlwind before a windstorm. This talks about a prophetic time when the peoples and nations of the earth will act like a roaring and rushing sea of many waters. And this is a prophecy that is about the last days in connection with the same time frame after the city of Damascus is completely destroyed. So we know that Syria is modern day Damascus. And we've seen Syria, practically destroyed. Well, when it's completely destroyed, then the sea of people is supposed to rise. And it makes sense that it's a sea. It's like a rushing of water. So they're going back and forth. So an online prophet I like, Rhonda Epson, she had a dream recently, right before this happened, with the tragedy of George Floyd, which was a tragedy, and we all agree on that. Um, she had a dream that there was a huge storm and there was just a lot of waves and rushing and a huge storm. And I was thinking this might be her dream. Um, but me, I have had continual dreams. So I had a dream about a bear, a huge bear, the other night. So it was climbing up something, kind of like maybe getting to safety. And when I finally got to the top of this thing, I was going to go open the door, and I heard this huge bear and knew that there was this huge bear. And then I had to run from this bear. This was a couple nights ago, probably May 30th. So now a bear in symbolism in the Bible, which, I've heard, but I also kind of believe that it means economic hardship. So I've already prophesied this. Other prophets have as well. But this bear was definitely in the dream, and definitely when maybe I was trying to climb up, like I've been struggling financially, like a lot of you have during COVID. But so maybe trying to struggle up, and then you meet the bear. So definitely that economic shortage is coming. I mean, economic collapse. So we need to pay attention to that. And also in Amos, it talks about the bear. So Amos 5:18, woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. Why do you long for the day of the Lord? The day will be darkness, not light. It will be as though a man fled from a lion, only to meet a bear. As he entered into his house and rested his hand on the wall, only to have a snake bite him. Will not the day of the Lord be darkness, not light, pitch dark, without a day of brightness? So I had another dream a couple months ago. I was in LA, and didn't really think of Amos in the dream. I was just in LA, and I used to live there, so I was just on the streets I'm familiar with, and I ran into a lion. There was a lion on the steps, and I'm like, oh my God, like there's a lion. So I started to run from the lion, and I met a bear. There was a bear. And then people in the dream that I knew, some not really close friends, but people I knew, all different cultures, all different languages, they started to turn on me violently and viciously because I was a believer. And I couldn't find a safe spot wherever I went. So it's interesting that in Amos, it talks about that exact. I think I was having a prophetic dream, exactly how Amos described it, that I saw a lion and then I ran into a bear. So when things are going to turn, as the sea of people are going to be more and more unsettled with economic hardship, COVID-19, the second wave of the COVID-19, but also the prophesied stinging virus that's supposed to come. These terrorist groups, everything being so unsettled, it's going to get scary out there. And so it's important as believers, you just really don't want to live normally. You really want to be paying attention to the Lord. Should I go down that street? Should I move from that city? You can see my talk I did on safe states. Maybe there's a few more months this summer that you might just want to pack up and move out of a city. So anyway, more about the Hebrew translation of Isaiah 17. So the Hebrew word for here, for rushing or rush, is sha'an, and it literally means to rush in the sense of a destructive rushing, a rushing that brings destruction. There's not really a good English word that corresponds to the Hebrew word except for the word cataclysmic. Cataclysm might come close. So what is this describing in Hebrew is a mighty rushing waves of water, like a flood, like a river, even more so like a tsunami. Except this is not a tsunami of water, but rather rushing, destructive waves and waters of people. So we're seeing in the current riots some of the people's out of their frustration and out of their agendas, being destructive and being like these waves and rushing water. So this is why I wanted to talk about it today. Most translations in verse 13 have, but God rebukes them, or he rebukes them. But God is not in the original Hebrew. The word God is not in the original Hebrew in verse 13. So it's rather would mean just rebuke. All it says is rebuke, gear, rebuke. If it said he rebukes, then it would be written differently. So what the Hebrew literally says here is, but rebuke it, using the word, which is made up of a certain prefix to literally mean like on it, or rebuke it. It doesn't say rebuke them, but it. So like a sea, I guess it would be like a sea as an entity in itself. And this gives us a picture that perhaps that during this time that we, maybe people of God, can rebuke it, or maybe there's places that are have rebuked it, so that we're not caught up in those waves. Jesus is very clear in Luke 21, 25 through 28. There will be signs on the sun, moon, and stars. So we're having those. We've had those. I've talked about those. Upon the earth, anxiety of nations and perplexity, the roaring of the sea and waves, men fainting because of fear and apprehension of what is coming on the earth. For the powers of the heaven will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great esteem. And when these things begin to come to be, look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draws nigh. So my daughter was asking me last night if she should go to a protest, and we've seen these protests, turning pretty ugly in a lot of cities. And I just thought of this study on the roaring of the people like waves, and seeing them roaring. And I said, the Lord says, when these things happen, look up and lift your heads up, for your redemption draws nigh. I don't mean you shouldn't take a stand for righteousness, and you shouldn't support and love your neighbor and all this stuff. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, don't get caught up in the tumultuous rushing of the peoples, because it's going to get worse. There was a fear with COVID that was fearful, and people are fearful, and financial fearful, and now we're fearful and of racism, and of violence and terror. So we don't want to get caught up in that. Yeshua explains that the nations and people of the earth will be in such anxiety and fear and bewilderment that they'll be like a rushing and roaring of sea and waves, like a tsunami. But Yahweh's people are not to be caught up into the tsunami of nations and peoples rushing destructively about like the roaring sea. When the people of the earth begin to come out across the earth like a tsunami, like a roaring sea, Yahweh's people are to look up, and peace and contentment in the midst of the storm, because the redemption is coming very soon. So it's really important not to get caught up in the fear and the anxiety of the things that are happening and are going to keep happening, because once that sixth seal breaks and the earthquake, and some people's view is prophetically the Lord is allowing this time right now, this civil unrest, which was prophesied. I just want to bring that up. I mean, I had prophetic words about civil unrest last summer, and like I said, I often get things really early, so it's hard for me sometimes to know timing. So a lot of prophetic people have seen civil unrest coming, and this is the rising of that, and it's going to be more and more. So we have to keep looking up and keep asking the Lord what He wants each of us to do each day. And it's going to get worse when, like, so say we're weakened to the point when then we can be attacked. Like, I've had prophetic words about attacks on NATO and attacks, World War III. A lot of prophetic things about World War III. There's attacks on our soil, like, so there's been tons of prophetic words about this, and biblical views on that. So anyway, this is happening. So we're happening, and we're kind of seeing it happen. So it will lead up to Revelation 13:1. I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and upon his horn 10 crowns, and upon his heads names of blasphemy. So the sea and the waters of the people are the foundation where the beast of the sea and the whore of Babylon will get their power. They get empowered by the seas and waters of the people. And these people might be crying out for, we need government, we need food, we need water, and they're really starting to suffer because of the natural catastrophes and the wars and the viruses and all the things that are going to keep happening, all the plagues. We have all the plagues happening right now. We've got disease, we've got locusts, we've got drought, we've got famine, we've got financial hardship, we got waters turning to blood, and we have the fish dying and the animals dying. We have all the plagues of Egypt upon us now. They're happening now. They've been happening the last few years. And they're going to keep happening. So when the nations and the people turn like a tsunami, like the roaring waters, then the beasts can take control. So as long as you're aware that this time is coming. Now, I do believe there might be pockets of safety for some of God's people. I also believe there are going to be people being beheaded and being called as martyrs. I believe the best case scenario is just do what God leads you to do. But what I believe is if you can be watching, the Lord is pretty clear that you can escape this time. Now, I don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, so I believe we are going to be here in some form for 3.5 years. I'm totally terrified about it, but I also have done talks about how the enemy tried to make it scarier. Like, if we're with the Lord, then we're going to be okay. Like, we're going to have his presence, we're going to have his peace, we're going to have his power, no matter what happens, And if you're called to be martyred, you're going to have his presence, you're going to have his peace, you're going to have the Lord with you. Like, the Lord is the power, the Lord is in control. The Lord has caused this time of tribulation to come for his purposes alone. And we just have to really keep thinking about that. So when Daniel had his vision in Daniel 7:2-3, I looked in my vision by night and saw 4 winds of heaven bursting forth from the great sea, and 4 huge beasts rose up from the sea, different one from another. So we know that the forest, when Daniel saw, I saw the 4 winds of heaven bursting forth onto the great sea. Okay, so the sea is the sea of people, like we just were talking about, the sea of humanity, lost in their calamity. It was a little song I wrote. So when the 4 winds of heaven burst onto the great sea, then the 4 huge beasts rose up from the sea, different from another. So we know that 3 have already come, and we're waiting for this last beast to rise, the final beast, which Daniel and Revelation is revealing together, which will be the empire of all the 4 beasts, the 3 beasts before, and then the world empire that's coming to Russian, to bring forth the little horn and the anti-Messiah into power. So I'm getting some of this information from a PDF that's downloadable, and I will link it below. It's really some great info. And of course, you can watch my end time series and any of my videos. I just have tons and tons of great prophetic stuff that will help you get prepared for the Lord coming back. So we don't know what these four winds are, but in Revelation 7:1 reveals there's four messengers standing at the four corners holding back the four winds to prevent them from blowing on the sea of people until the appointed time. So after this, I saw four messengers standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth. So the winds should not blow on the earth, nor the sea, nor on any tree. So the four messengers, angels, are not allowed to release the four winds until the 144,000 have been sealed from the tribe of Israel. Now, these could be sealed already. They haven't risen up into their witness, their 3.5 years of witness, but they could already be sealed. There's some prophetic things about that in the link below. I'm not going to go into the 144,000 right now. But when we think of a wind, so what can be a wind? Well, disease can spread in the air like COVID-19, but it's kind of like a breeze compared to what might be coming. I know Sadhu prophesied a wind, this stinging virus, which I also had prophetic words coming. Something like those, like that could be four winds. It could be, viruses. It could be violence. It could be, ugliness, like whatever the icky stuff that's going to be released on that the angels are holding back for until the appointed time. So when they let those winds go and the winds of Daniel go upon the sea of people, then we're going to see them tossed, and the wicked are definitely going to be tossed, like it says in Isaiah 57. The bad are like the tossed sea, unable to rest, with waters tossing up mud and mire. There is no peace for the bad or the wicked, it says in the King James. So anyway, so these are some signs to look for in the end times, and we're right on the brink of this sign coming to pass. We're, very near. Is it 6 months? I don't know. Is it a year? I don't know. I think I prophetically feel it's probably sometime in 2021 that we're going to see the final tsunami rushing of the peoples and the rise of the Antichrist. So, but it's definitely what we're supposed to look for. People being tossed to and fro in fear and anxiety, in violence, in looting, in distress, in anxiety, maybe doing a lot of icky things out of fear and anxiety. When the sea of people of the earth begin to roar and agitate and rush, that's when it's time to pay attention to the beast and the little horn coming out of this rushing and tsunami of the sea of people, these roaring waves of people. So the key in Yeshua's warning in Luke 21 is that people are not afraid of what's already on the earth. So it's already bad enough, right? But they're going to be afraid of what's coming on the earth. So what is it? Is it like, some people say we're going to be able to see Planet X pretty soon, actually see it. Is it going to be seeing it, that it may be impacting the earth? Is it going to be the food shortages and worried about the food? Is it going to be, there's been so many plagues and so many viruses that now, they're worried about what's next and they've been weakened? I don't know. But is the fear of what's coming in the future that causes them to become a roaring tsunami sea to bring the final beast into power? And of course, then they'll be looking for, a leader, a world leader, government, to take care of them. And that's when exactly the people of God will not be, anywhere near them, not taking the mark of the beast, not worshiping the mark of the beast. But this will be where there's some people of God that may be caught up in the sea of people. Maybe they'll lose their salvation. I don't know. But maybe they'll be trapped, the fear is being trapped then in a place where you really can't get out, when, the final mark of the beast is ordered, that you worship the image of the beast. So we may see this fulfillment of the prophecy really soon, and the opening of the seventh seal. It's something to watch for. The fear and anxiety and panic right now, from COVID-19, economic collapse, and what's happening with the riots. There's also riots going on in other countries right now, not just America. So it could have been a spirit of violence that the Lord released. Is it a plague? I don't know, but this is going to happen more and more. The roaring of the sea of people. And so look up, because your redemption draws nigh, and don't get tossed in the roaring of the people. Just stay in the ark, stay in your boat, stay in Jesus. Be super solid in your faith that this world is not our home, and his kingdom is not of this earth. And the peace is never going to be on this earth until he comes again for the millennial peace. We're not going to be having world peace anytime soon. So anyway, I'm sorry it's a little bit long of a video, but I really wanted to bring this out now because we have this really good picture of the roaring of the sea of people and what might be happening. So stay safe, keep your family safe. The Lord is with you, and he is mighty. He is mighty. And the Lord thy God in the midst of you is mighty. He's mighty to save.